While I was getting my diploma, my mom texted, "Can't come. Your sister's dance recital is more important." They didn't know I'd become a famous surgeon. Now, as I receive a top award, they're sitting in the back row, realizing what they missed. Their faces went pale when they saw my name. "Oh, you didn't know about Emma's recital?" My mother's dismissive voice crackled through the phone. "It's her big showcase today. The whole family will be there. You understand, right?" I stood in my graduation gown, clutching my phone so tightly. My knuckles turned white. Of course, they wouldn't come. Of course, my sister's dance recital would take precedence over my medical school graduation. Why had I expected anything different? "Sure, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I understand completely. My name is Olivia Sterling. And at 28, I was about to graduate at the top of my class from Johns Hopkins Medical School. Not that my family would know. They'd stopped paying attention to my achievements long ago. Around the same time, my younger sister, Emma, discovered dance. The ceremony was starting in an hour, and the auditorium was already filling with proud families clutching bouquets and balloons. I watched as my classmates hugged their parents, posed for photos, celebrated this milestone together. Meanwhile, I stood alone trying to ignore the ache in my chest. "We'll make it up to you, honey," my mother continued, though we both knew she didn't mean it. "Maybe we can do dinner next week." "Oh, wait. Emma has her summer intensive starting then." I hung up before she could finish. There was no point in listening to more excuses. I'd heard them all before. Every achievement, every milestone somehow always coincided with one of Emma's performances or competitions. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. It was a pattern. Growing up in our suburban Boston home, I'd always been the responsible one. While Emma twirled and leaped her way through childhood, I studied hard. Perfect grades, student council president, volunteer work at the local hospital. I did everything right, but somehow, it was never enough. "Your sister has a real gift," my father would say, barely glancing at my report card full of A's. "She could be the next primal ballerina." Even now, as I prepare to become a doctor, all they could talk about was Emma's promising dance career. Never mind that I'd earned a full scholarship to medical school or that I'd already been offered a prestigious residency position. In their eyes, I was just the reliable one, the one who didn't need attention or support because I would succeed anyway. As I took my seat among my fellow graduates, I thought about all the times they'd missed. My high school graduation, Emma had a regional competition, my college acceptance celebration, Emma's first solo performance, even my white coat ceremony, Emma's summer showcase. Each time, I told myself it didn't matter, that I was doing this for myself, not for them. But it did matter. It mattered that my own family couldn't spare a few hours to watch me achieve my dreams. It mattered that they'd never once visited me during medical school, never asked about my studies, never showed any interest in the path I've chosen. "Olivia Sterling," the dean called my name, and I walked across the stage with my head held high. The applause from the crowd was polite, generic. They didn't know me, didn't know how hard I'd worked for this moment. As I accepted my diploma, I scanned the audience out of habit, knowing I wouldn't see any familiar faces. But something inside me shifted at that moment. Standing there, looking out at the sea of proud families, I made a decision. This would be the last time I let their absence diminish my achievements. The last time I accepted their excuses and dismissals. After the ceremony, while my classmates celebrated with their families, I went back to my apartment and began packing. The residency position I'd accepted was at Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the best in the country. I've chosen it partly because it was close to home, thinking maybe proximity would help bridge the gap between us. Now I picked up my phone and made a call. "Dr. Harrison, this is Olivia Sterling. I was wondering if that position at Stanford is still available." There was a pause on the other end. "It is actually. We'd love to have you, Olivia, but I thought you decided on Mass General to be closer to family." I looked around my apartment at the walls bare of family photos, at the graduation cards from everyone except those who should have cared the most. "Plans change," I said firmly. "I'd like to accept the Stanford position if you'll still have me." "Absolutely." Dr. Harrison's enthusiasm was genuine. "We'll start the paperwork right away." "Welcome to California, Dr. Sterling." I didn't tell my family about the change in plans. Let them find out when they finally decided to pay attention. Let them realize what they'd lost when it was too late to fix it. That evening, as I finished packing, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was a video of Emma's recital followed by the message, "Wasn't she amazing? The whole family is so proud." I didn't respond. Instead, I booked my flight to California and began researching apartments in Palo Alto. It was time to build a life where my achievements wouldn't be overshadowed, where my success would speak for itself. The next morning, I woke up to several missed calls from my mother. When I finally answered, her voice was sharp with annoyance. "Olivia, why haven't you congratulated your sister? She worked so hard for that performance." I took a deep breath, fighting back the familiar urge to apologize, to accommodate, to make things easier for everyone else. I graduated from medical school yesterday, Mom. I'm a doctor now. There was a pause. Then all right, of course. Well, we'll celebrate soon. Okay. Emma's got another showcase next weekend, but maybe after that. Don't bother. I cut her off. I'm moving to California. I accepted a residency position at Stanford. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice tight with surprise and something else. Was it actually concern? California? But I thought, what about Mass General? What about being close to family? I almost laughed at that. What family, Mom? The one that couldn't make it to my graduation. The one that's never shown any interest in my career. That family. You're being dramatic, he said, defaulting to her usual dismissal of my feelings. We've always supported you. It's just that Emma needs. Emma needs. Emma wants. Emma. I interrupted. Well, now I need something. I need to go somewhere where my achievements matter, where I can build a life without constantly being pushed aside. I could hear her starving to argue, but for once, I didn't let her finish. I have to go, Mom. My flight leaves in a few hours. Gave my love to Emma. I hung up before she could respond, before she could try to guilt me into staying, before she can make me doubt my decision. This was my moment, my choice, my future. As I drove to the airport, my phone kept buzzing with messages from my family. My father telling me I was being selfish. My mother alternating between guilt trips and demands. Even Emma probably prompted by our parents asking why I was running away. I turned off my phone. They had years to show up for me. Years to care about my dreams and achievements. Now it was too late. I was done being the reliable one. The one who would always be there despite their indifference. It was time to become someone new. Someone whose success couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of my story. In California, I would build something they couldn't overlook, achieve things they couldn't minimize. And when they finally realized what they'd lost, when they finally saw me for who I was and what I'd accomplished, it would be from the back row watching as I accepted accolades they never thought I'd achieve. The plane took off, carrying me toward my new life, and I didn't look back. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting ahead. About becoming someone so successful that their indifference becomes their loss, not yours. As the East Coast disappeared beneath the clouds, I smiled. They'd forgotten my graduation, but they wouldn't forget what came next. I'd make sure of that. 3 years into my residency at Stanford, I was thriving in ways my family couldn't begin to comprehend. I had developed a groundbreaking surgical technique for pediatric heart surgery, published several papers in leading medical journals, and was quickly becoming known as one of the most promising young surgeons in the country. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents were still fixated on Emma's local dance performances, I was saving children's lives and revolutionizing cardiac surgery. Not that they knew any of this. I've maintained minimal contact since moving to California, responding to their occasional text with brief, non-committal replies. Dr. Sterling, Dr. Harrison called out as I was finishing my rounds one morning. Have you seen the latest issue of Medical Innovation Quarterly? I shook my head buried in a patient's chart. You're on the cover, he said, holding up the magazine. Rising star in pediatric surgery. Dr. Olivia Sterling's revolutionary technique saves lives. My heart skipped a beat as I took the magazine. There I was in my surgical scrubs looking confident and accomplished. The article detailed my innovations in pediatric cardiac surgery and predicted I would reshape the future of pediatric medicine. The hospital board is thrilled, Dr. Harrison continued. They're fast-tracking you for department head. At 31, you'll be the youngest in the hospital's history. I was still processing this news when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother, the first in months. Emma's been accepted into the City Ballet, principal dancer. We're having a family celebration this weekend. You should come home for it. I stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. Of course, even now, they had no idea what I'd achieved, what I'd become. To them, I was still just Olivia, the reliable daughter who should drop everything to celebrate Emma's latest accomplishment. Everything, okay? Dr. Harrison asked, noticing my expression. My family, I explained, showing him the text. They still haven't figured out that I've built a life without them. He frowned, glancing at the magazine cover. They don't know about any of this. They've never asked, I said simply. They're too busy with my sister's dance career. That evening, as I performed a complicated heart surgery on a 6-year-old boy, I thought about how different my life had become. Here, I was literally holding a child's heart in my hands while my family probably assumed I was just doing routine checkups in some small clinic. The surgery was successful. They always were with my technique. And as I walked out of the OR, I was met with applause from the observing medical students. Word of my innovations had spread, And now surgeons from around the world were coming to Stanford to learn from me. My thumb buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Why haven't you responded about Emma's celebration? The whole family will be there. Don't you want to support your sister? I took a deep breath and typed out a response. Can't make it. I have surgery scheduled. I attached a link to the Medical Innovation Quarterly article, wondering if they even bothered to read it. They didn't, of course. My mother's response came quickly. Surgeries? You mean checkups? Surely, you can reschedule those. This is important. Before I could respond, an emergency case came in. A 4-year-old with a complex heart defect that most surgeons wouldn't even attempt to repair. But I wasn't most surgeons. 6 hours later, as I successfully completed the impossible surgery, news cameras waited outside the OR. The story of the miracle surgery would make national headlines, but I barely noticed. I was too focused on my next case, my next innovation, my next step forward. A week later, Dr. Harrison called me into his office. The American Medical Association wants you to speak at their annual conference, he said, sliding an invitation across his desk. They're giving you their Innovation in Medicine Award. It's quite an honor. Usually goes to surgeons with decades more experience. I picked up the invitation, reading the details. The ceremony would be in Boston of all places, just a few miles from my family's home. You should invite them, Dr. Harrison said gently, knowing my history. Let them see what you've accomplished. I considered it. Part of me wanted them to see, wanted them to understand what they'd missed by dismissing me all these years. But another part remembered every missed milestone, every forgotten achievement, every time they'd chosen Emma's performances over my accomplishments. That evening, I sat in my elegant Palo Alto apartment, staring at my phone. The invitation to the ceremony sat on my coffee table, its gold embossing catching the light. Finally, I picked up my phone and typed out a message. I'm receiving an award from the American Medical Association next month. The ceremony's in Boston, thought you might want to know. I hit send before I could change my mind. Then I waited. Hours passed. No response. The next morning, I woke to a string of texts from my mother. Emma's got an audition for the National Ballet that day. We can't miss that. But maybe we can meet for breakfast the next day. You understand? Right? I didn't respond. Instead, I called my assistant and arranged for extra tickets to be set aside. They might not plan to come, but they'd have the option. And more importantly, they'd have front row seats to watch what they'd missed all these years. As the date approached, I threw myself into my work with even more intensity. Every successful surgery, every saved life, every innovation felt like another step away from the girl who'd been forgotten at her own graduation. The night before I flew to Boston, I performed one last surgery, saving a young dancer's heart. Ironically enough, as I walked out of the OR, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom says you're getting some kind of doctor award. That's nice, but you'll never guess what happened at my audition. I didn't respond. Tomorrow, they'd understand exactly what kind of doctor award I was receiving. Tomorrow, they'd finally see what they overlooked all these years. As my plane touched down in Boston, I felt a strange mix of emotions. This wasn't about revenge. I'd moved past that need long ago. This was about recognition, about standing in my own light, about showing them that their indifference hadn't defined me. It was about becoming someone they couldn't ignore even if they tried. The Boston Marriott's Grand Ballroom was packed with the most distinguished names in medicine. Surgeons, researchers, and medical pioneers from around the world had gathered for the American Medical Association's annual award ceremony. I sat at the front table, my emerald evening gown, a stark contrast to my usual surgical scrubs. Dr. Sterling, a voice called out. I turned to see Dr. Sarah Mitchell, one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the world. Your paper on minimally invasive pediatric techniques changed the game. I've implemented your method at my hospital in London. I smiled, engaging in conversation about future collaborations, all while keeping one eye on the entrance. The tickets I'd reserved for my family remain at the check-in desk, unclaimed. The ceremony began with speeches and presentations. I half listened, my mind drifting to the last text I'd received from my mother that morning. Emma's dress rehearsal went perfectly. Everyone says she's sure to get the lead role. My attention snapped back to the present as the MC approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present this year's Innovation in Medicine Award. Our recipient has revolutionized pediatric cardiac surgery, saving countless lives with her groundbreaking techniques. As he continued listing my achievements, I noticed movement at the back of the ballroom. My breath caught in my throat. There they were. My parents, Emma, even my grandmother being quietly ushered to their reserved seats in the back row. They looked confused, out of place, clearly having rushed here from Emma's rehearsal. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Olivia Sterling. The applause was thunderous as I stood and made my way to the podium. From the corner of my eye, I could see my family's expressions shift from confusion to shock as they realized exactly what kind of doctor award this was. Thank you, I began, my voice clear and confident. When I performed my first pediatric heart surgery, I made a promise to myself. Every child deserves a chance at life, and every heart, no matter how broken, deserves a chance to beat. I continued my speech, detailing the journey that had led to my innovations, the lives saved, the boundaries pushed. I didn't look at my family again, but I could feel their presence, their growing understanding of what they had missed. After the ceremony, I was surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations and discussing future collaborations. Through the crowd, I saw my family hovering uncertainly at the edge of the room. Olivia, my mother's voice cut through the chatter. She had managed to make her way to me with my father and Emma trailing behind. Why did you tell us about all this? I turned to face them, acutely aware of the contrast between us. Me in my elegant gown, and still in the casual clothes they had worn to Emma's rehearsal. I did tell you, I replied calmly. I sent you articles, invitations, updates. You were always too busy with Emma's performances to notice. But this is my father gestured around the room at the prominent doctors, the media photographers, the scale of the event. This is bigger than we thought. Everything I've done has been bigger than you thought, I said, keeping my voice level. You just never bothered to look. Emma stepped forward, her dancer's posture rigid. Why didn't you make us understand? You could have insisted. Like, you had to insist? I asked quietly. Did you have to beg them to come to your performances? Did you have to plead for their attention? Before they could respond, Dr. Mitchell approached our group. Dr. Sterling, the team from Johns Hopkins wants to discuss implementing your technique in their pediatric unit. Oh, are these your parents? You must be so proud of your daughter's achievements. I watched as my parents fumble through a response, clearly realizing how little they knew about my work, my success, my life. Emma stood silently, perhaps for the first time understanding that she wasn't the only one in the family who had accomplished something significant. Excuse me, I said politely. I should speak with the Johns Hopkins team. As I walked away, I heard my mother's voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. We had no idea. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, congratulations, and future planning. My innovations were opening doors I've never imagined, creating opportunities that would take me even further from the family that had overlooked me for so long. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I received a text from my grandmother. I always knew you were extraordinary, Olivia. I'm sorry we missed seeing it sooner. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking out at the Boston skyline. Tomorrow, I would fly back to California, back to my surgeries, my research, my real life. My family would return to their world of dance recitals and local performances, but something had shifted. They had finally seen me, really seen me, and that knowledge couldn't be undone. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for the airport, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Can we meet for coffee, please? We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, thinking about all the times I needed them, all the moments they'd missed, all the achievements they'd overlooked. Then I typed my response. I have a surgery scheduled in California. Children's lives don't wait, even for family talks. It was time to go home, my real home, where my work mattered, where my achievements were celebrated, where I had built a life they couldn't diminish. They had watched from the back row as I accepted my award. Now they would watch from the sidelines as I continued to soar. 5 years after the award ceremony in Boston, my life had evolved beyond anything my family could have imagined. My surgical techniques had become the global standard for pediatric cardiac care, and I'd opened a specialized children's cardiac center at Stanford. My name wasn't just in medical journals anymore. It was on hospital wings. I'd received occasional messages from my family over the years. My mother's text became increasingly apologetic. My father sent awkward holiday cards, and Emma's Instagram posts now included proud mentions of her brilliant surgeon sister. But I maintained my distance, focused on building my legacy. Then came the call that would bring everything full circle. Dr. Sterling, my assistant said one morning, there's an urgent case from Boston Children's Hospital. A young dancer, age 16, complex cardiac condition. They're requesting you specifically. I looked at the patient file on my screen and felt my heart stop. The patient's name was Sophia Williams, Emma's student. My mother's subsequent frantic call confirmed it. Olivia, please, he begged, her voice breaking. She's Emma's most promising student. They say you're the only one who can help her. I closed my eyes thinking of all the times they'd chosen Emma's dance world over my medical achievements. Now that same world needed my help. Have them transfer her to Stanford, I said professionally. I'll clear my schedule. When they arrived, Emma, my parents, and young Sophia, the contrast between our last meeting was stark. This time, they were the ones in unfamiliar territory, wandering through my domain of pristine hospital corridors and cutting-edge medical equipment. This is my father gestured at the Dr. Olivia Sterling Pediatric Cardiac Center sign. Incredible. I led them to my office, its walls lined with awards, research papers, and thank you letters from parents whose children I'd saved. My mother's eyes lingered on each one, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd missed. Sophia's case is complex, I explained, pulling up her scans, but I've developed a new procedure that should help. Emma, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. Will she be able to dance again? I looked at my sister, seeing not the favorite child who had overshadowed me, but a teacher worried about her student. If the surgery is successful, yes, and my surgeries are always successful. The operation was scheduled for the next morning. As I scrubbed in, I could see my family in the observation room. Their first time witnessing what I actually did, who I have become. 6 hours later, I walked out of the OR, exhausted but satisfied. Sophia's heart was beating strongly, her future as a dancer secure. Thank you, Emma whispered, hugging me for the first time in years. I never really understood what you do, who you are. I'm so sorry, Olivia. My parents stood nearby, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and regret. They had finally seen me in my element, saving lives with the same precision and grace that Emma brought to her dancing. We were wrong, my mother said quietly. So wrong for so long. Can you forgive us? I looked at them, really looked at them. They had missed so much, overlooked so much, but perhaps that was their loss more than mine. I had built something remarkable, become someone remarkable, not because of their support, but despite its absence. I forgave you long ago, I replied, but I don't need your approval anymore. I know exactly who I am and what I'm worth. They nodded, understanding that while forgiveness was possible, our relationship would never return to what it was, nor should it. I had outgrown their narrow view of success, their limited understanding of achievement. As they left to check on Sophia, I sat in my office looking out over the Stanford campus. The young girl who had stood alone at her graduation was gone, replaced by a woman who had transformed pediatric surgery, saved countless lives, and built a legacy that would outlast any dance recital. My phone buzzed. Another medical journal wanting an interview. Another hospital requesting my expertise. This was my life now. My success. My story. And while my family might finally recognize its worth, their recognition was no longer something I needed. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in making others see your value, but in knowing it so completely yourself that their validation becomes irrelevant. They have forgotten my graduation, but in doing so, they had set me free to soar beyond their limited expectations.